Okay, this is Dr. Ibrahim Weizfeld of the Jewish Socialist Bund introducing Steve Struggle here, who has a veteran history, of great interest. And I think we should all hear from you about how you came to be who you are now.
Well, thank you for letting me be for talking to you today. I think I want to talk about something recent that I think that will give people a better understanding of what kind of work I've done. Last year, this time, I was a participant in a months-long occupation of a school in East Oakland called Parker Elementary School. The occupation was carried out by groups of teachers, parents, and community activists who were opposed to the wave of school closures that had hit Oakland Unified School District. Currently in the news, you have school boards evicting the state superintendent of public instruction from meetings. You have school boards opposing human rights for non-heterosexual students. But Oakland School Board is unique in the sense that it had become a target for privatizers from the charter and private sphere who wanted to essentially buy Oakland schools and make them into mixed use facilities, work, play, live kind of places. And that was scheduled for Parker. So the people involved in the organizing were from various political parties. Some left parties. Most were activists who were opposed to school closures. So I want you to see that I'm the kind of activist and freedom fighter that believes that you have to get the people involved. The vanguard alone cannot make the revolution. You must have people involved in the revolution. It's just bottom line. So whatever I've been involved in, be it anti-police terror struggles, struggles for rights for prisoners, struggles to support the people in Palestine, struggles to support the native people and to support the land and to demand that the environment might not be destroyed by the capitalist imperialist class. Whatever I've been doing, I've always organized from the sense of you must organize the people. You cannot do it a handful of people alone. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
So how did you begin being an activist? That was in Chicago, wasn't it?
No, I've worked in various states, West Coast, the Deep South, some in the Midwest. But I would say I began my activism in high school and in college. Opposition to imperialist war, opposition to police terror, supporting women's rights, things like that.
That was with the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party at the time, wasn't it?
No, I had no affiliation with the Chicago Black Panthers, none whatsoever.
No. So, what communities have you worked with? First of all, with
well, I've always been a supporter of rights for people in their jobs. So I guess that's the working class community, Black community, solidarity with the Mexican Chicano community, with the Native American community. Trying to think, prisoners, women, international communities. I mentioned the Palestinians, the Grenadians, the Cubans. Anyone who is fighting against imperialism, especially governments that have been targeted by the United States for sanction and for punishment, I've always showed solidarity with them.
I began activists, when I was a kid, practically a baby, like I grew up, with socialist parents who were refugees. And my mother came from the Warsaw Ghetto and my father from the Lublin ghetto, a city in the south of Poland. And they both escaped into the USSR. The USSR saved, well, I've heard accounts of like 500,000 up to 1.5 million Jewish refugees were saved, during the Nazi occupation of Europe. And that's despite the what's called the Stalin-Hitler Pact, where half of Poland essentially was handed over to the Nazi regime, and the other half was taken by the Soviet Union under Comrade Stalin there. So, as soon as the ghetto was set up, as soon as the wall was built, my mother said, time to get out. So she climbed over the wall. She had a message from her brother who had gone into the forest in Russia and set up a base camp for what became partisans. And so, with the directions on where to go, she finally had, a way to get out of the ghetto, because, you can climb over the wall, but then where do you go? Like it's very sort of, difficult scenario. So with the message that she got from her brother, she jumps over the wall, she goes into the forest. Yeah, the way she got into into Russia was very interesting, because she had to sneak onto a train to get as close to the border as possible. And, Jewish people weren't allowed to buy tickets at that time, because you had to have, identification, to buy a ticket and everything like that. And if you were Jewish, you wouldn't get a ticket, because you weren't allowed to go anywhere. So she snuck onto a train, hid under a bench, got close to the frontier, and walked the rest of the way, into Russia and into the forest, and met up with her brother. And then she actually came back and got back into the ghetto, jumped over the wall again, and got her younger sister out the second time, and brought back messages, and circulated the information on everybody on where to escape to. So it was like a whole underground railway, that was set up at the time. And my father, he did the same, but on his own. And then he came back and got out his younger brother, who had actually, started working as a cop, a Jewish cop inside the ghetto, for the Nazi regime. So he got his brother to quit, and he took him away, into the USSR. And then they met, in a refugee camp in Weizfeld, in Germany, Western Germany, where I was conceived, in the refugee camp. And they got their documentation, which, like a document in place of a passport, because, they weren't able to get a passport to get out of Poland. So they didn't have a passport, and now I'm trying to prove, to the Polish government that my parents were Polish, with the documentation that I have available, in order to prove that they should be giving me my citizenship for Poland. But they don't want to. They consider the Jewish people at that time to be like wards of the state, but not citizens. And wards of the state don't get a passport for some reason, and are not citizens for some reason. So it's so I'm putting the Polish government in a very difficult position right now, because I just sent them documentation to prove that my documentation is correct, that was recognized by the American, administration in Germany. It was recognized by Germany because they married my parents, and it was recognized by Canada Immigration, when they stamped, the document on the backside when they came into Canada. So my parents had proof that they came from Poland, that they were citizens. It says citizenship Poland, but Poland refuses to recognize that. So if they don't recognize my last submission, I don't know what to do. Like I'm going to take them to European court or something, if that exists. I'm going to make a fuss over it, because I'm not going to let them get away with this.
You do that, and you do that, and we're never going to support you if you do that.
Yeah, that'll be interesting, because then we can take on the whole Polish government and their whole,
The whole thing, though, is this whole thing about migration and citizenship. It's a bit much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a bit much. I mean, if people need to go somewhere, unless it's really ridiculous, just let them go where they need to go. But governments, they want to deny this, they want to deny that. I don't know what the real issue is, but it does bother me, because people either want to go somewhere, or they have these little schemes to bring certain people in, and then they can, hey, open the door, here you come on in, no problem, Yeah, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, well, like the migrants who are coming from the South, to the United States. What's the problem? There's work to be done. They want to work. The only question is giving them a decent wage to do the work. But the reason why they're being sort of kept out is not for economic reasons, despite capitalist interests. It's because, look, the percentage of Anglo-Americans is about 21%. The percentage of German Americans is like 20%. So that's like only 41%. So plus some other Europeans, like, okay, at most, what's called, what they call themselves as, whites are only like 45% of the population. And they're worried about losing the majority, especially when it comes to voting. So they'll do anything to stop non-white people from voting. And then, they don't want to have any more immigrants who are not, of their kind. And that's why they're trying to keep the migrants out. I think that's the basic reason why. And they're, like they couldn't care less what's going to happen to them, even if they die. Same thing with Europe. They're letting all these migrants, drown in the Mediterranean. There was a boat of 700 people who was crossing over, from Turkey around Cyprus, on the far side of Cyprus, to get to Italy, because they didn't have much hope for getting ashore in Greece. So they were going a long way around, and the motor stopped, and so then people started like shifting to one side of the boat, and the thing actually tipped over because of that. And there's like 700 people on that boat, and they only saved like about 75, 100. They don't say what happened to the rest of the people, but they just ended up killing 600 people because of their policy of rejecting migrants from trouble spots in the world that they created themselves.
And the value of those lives in the view of the ruling class is little to none. They have no value. Whereas if 4 billionaires want to go in some ridiculous submarine to look at the Titanic, and which is like their foolishness. To me, I'm not saying they deserve to die, no, but you're pretty foolish to do something like that. Yeah. But they did it. They had money. They had money. They're rich people.
Yeah.
And the migrants dying on the high seas is not seen as a crime against humanity. It is a crime against humanity, because those are human beings who are just trying to go to a better life. That's all it is. I read a story about it yesterday. It was amazing. I read 2 stories about the recent sinking of a migrant boat, and in both of them, the boat was way overcrowded.
Yeah.
The authorities are trying to pin the blame on somebody who may have had nothing to do with it, and now there are other people who are in Libya or other countries, so-called warlords, who have a connection with these boats, and they pretty much are basically trafficking humans. That's what they're doing. And it's I'm really, when you tell me about your parents and their struggle as migrants in camps, people need to remember that when you're in this situation, life is very tenuous. The guy was saying yesterday that they gave him a piece of cheese and some dirty water to eat. Once a day. He had come from somewhere in Libya, paid some money to get to this place, to be put on this boat, and that people who disagree were taken out and shot, just killed, just murdered. So the lives of working people are taken very, very as being close to of no value, and humanity deserves a better way of living than this.
Yeah. They had a whole flotilla of rescue vessels that went out to find those 5 billionaires. And they did find them eventually, and they found them in the state that was presumed, to be their condition. And, they went, to get the pieces, left over, as if that, counted. But when the boatload, the SS San Luis in 1939 of Jewish refugees from Europe came to Cuba, United States, and Canada to find refuge here under international law, under the Treaty of Versailles, basically, which says, refugees have a right, to life. No, they were turned back. And 3/4 of them were killed in death camps, in Europe, during the course of the Holocaust.
Exactly. So, that's so what I'm curious to find out more about your history. Maybe we can talk about it next time. Your history with the state of Israel and your fight with the people of Palestine. But I realize we have limited time today. But next time I'd like to talk more to you about that.
Well, the reason why I became a partisan, with the Palestinians is because my mother was a Jewish Bundist, my father socialist. My socialists, like my parents, they refused to go to Palestine. Why? My father explained it to me because, he was religious Orthodox, modern Orthodox. Okay. So he said, he didn't want to go to Palestine because he didn't want to go to another war. He didn't want to go to kill anybody. He picked up a gun in Russia, when he was in the Workers' Guard. And he was sent out to guard a field so that nobody would come and steal the vegetables that they would grow. So he was there, guarding the field, stopping anybody, from stealing the goods. And this guy, comes up crawling, on the ground, to the field, looking for, like a little bit of vegetable, to eat, because he was starving. So, my father finds this guy, crawling up on the ground, like this, so weak that he was. And my father told me that he told this guy, like, what are you doing? I could have shot you. And the guy says, I don't care. I'm starving to death. I have to eat something. So then my father told me, okay, go ahead. It was that kind of condition, and my mother was telling him the way in which, like they survived as refugees in the Soviet Union, like while the Russians ate potatoes and they would peel off the potatoes, to eat them. And they would throw the peels away, and the refugees would go and get the peels and make soup out of the peels. And of course, the peels had more nutrients than the actual potato itself. And that's how the refugees survived in the Soviet Union. That's how my parents survived. And then in Toronto, all the refugees together in Toronto, and the reason they got into Canada was because they had to have, a member of their family who was already a citizen who would sponsor them. Those who didn't have a member of their family in Canada didn't get in. They didn't know where to go. And they should have stayed in Weizfeld, in the refugee camp there, and said, okay, this land is ours now, and this is where we're going to stay. But no, the Zionists came and they collected them, and, and the US authorities as well pushed them, into going to Palestine. And so they ended up, even though they weren't Zionists, they ended up going to Palestine, and their kids were taken into the Zionist educational system, indoctrinated to be, like Zionists, pro-Zionist and soldiers, and then continued on from there. Then there was the wave of immigration of the Arab Jews, then the Russian Jews, and, and that's how they occupied the country. That's the Zionist strategy, taking advantage of the Jewish people, when they have no other choice. So I decided to go to Palestine in 2003 because, like I had been educated, by my father not to be a Zionist. My mother, she was a Jewish Bundist, a socialist, and she was opposed to Zionism because Zionism doesn't fight against fascism. They let fascism be. They just want to make a deal with fascism to let them exist, as their own state, as if, the fascists are not going to do anything to the Jewish people living there eventually. And then, like, even if they're the last bunch to go, and nonetheless, they're willing to, to stay there, and hope that they're going to be left alone, which was the mentality of some Jewish people in the ghettos at the time under Nazi occupation, who thought that they would never be sent to the death camps, that it would only be their neighbor who would be sent to the death camps. So it took 3 years to organize a revolt in the Warsaw Ghetto, and culminating in the uprising of 1943, 3 years after the ghetto had been set up. So in Toronto, all the refugees, they were mostly socialists, Jewish Bundists, because the Jewish Bund was the majority of the Jewish population there. And they had an association called the Warsaw Lodja Mutual Benefit Society. And they would, like have meetings and this sort of thing, and I got a sense, that that I wasn't alone, that there was, like a movement. And with this idea, I went to, work in various movements, the Vietnam movement, etc., and the NAACP. And then I found, some socialists. I went to the New Democratic Party, the Social Democratic Party. And in there, I found the left wing, in the youth movement that were Trotskyists. So I went to work with the Trotskyists and they let me do what I wanted, so I hung out with them for 7 years until we split because we couldn't take the sectarianism anymore. They went berserk, under the influence of both the Paris leadership with Mandel and with the leadership of the Socialist Workers' Party in the United States, which started telling the Canadian section what to do as well. Barnes, who decided that they were going to make a turn towards the working class, and everybody was supposed to go and find a factory job, and pay high dues to the organization, of course. So all of that, didn't work. And a bunch of us, 18 of us, together with the founder, the organizer of the Canadian Trotskyist movement after the Second World War, Ross Dowson, who ran for mayor of Toronto at the time. And we set up our own organization. And even that didn't work, because it was still, this democratic centralist idea, like subjugated, thought to convention. And we couldn't take that. So after that, I worked on my own. And then realized, the reason why I was on my own was because I was a Jewish Bundist and not, a simple Marxist who rejected Jewish identity because it didn't fit in with the working class, and because the working class generally was anti-Semitic as well. So, I ended up working by myself and deciding that, in order to take on Zionism, you couldn't do it as a Marxist. Marxist's 1948 pamphlet on the Jewish question was a disaster and easily sort of denounced as being anti-Semitic, because it considered that Jewish people should assimilate, like Marx did, because his parents had converted to being Lutheran, and he was raised as a Lutheran. He wasn't even raised as a Jewish person. He didn't even know what Jewish was. So I ended up, working and set up the Alliance of Concerned Jewish Canadians after the 2001 conference that we had in Chicago to build a Jewish opposition movement. And then the Jewish Voice for Peace, sprung up, and all the other committees, not in our name, and Code Pink as well is in that tradition too, So that's the motivation that I had to go to Palestine in 2003 after Rochelle Corrie was killed. And there was a bunch of us there, 10 of us, in the International Solidarity Movement that were working in the Balata refugee camp in Nablus. And then we had a meeting one time in which an Israeli wanted to come in, and one volunteer from Poland didn't want the Israeli to come into the meeting. And in the discussion, it turned out that of the 10, 4 were Jewish. Incredible, incredible Jewish opposition. Individuals who chose to go to Palestine and fight against Zionism, one at a time, and who had no idea, who else was coming, and just spontaneously, from the tradition, of really being Jewish, they actually came there to support the Palestinians. And then I came back in 2011, 15, 16, 17, 18th, for 5 months at a time, and worked with the Tanweer Cultural Center Forum in Nablus. And then we would go out, to protect the demonstrators, all of the international volunteers who came into Nablus at the time. And we'd go there,
Wow.
And if we were there, they couldn't shoot live bullets, so we just, make ourselves obvious, to the soldiers. And then, the officers couldn't even order them to shoot, and the soldiers wouldn't have shot. What they did shoot, was rubber bullets and gas canisters, lots of gas canisters. But then, we got gas masks, and so it's like, cat and mouse game that was happening there.
Yeah.
But, that's what I've done in Palestine. And then, and over the 3 years that I was there, full time, I wrote the book, the Federation of Palestinian and Hebrew Nations, as a counterweight from a Jewish Bundist perspective to what was being proposed by the Palestinian Authority, which was a 2-state solution, which never happened. and Palestine was never recognized by Israel, even though the PLO recognized Israel. And then, the one-state solution people who are basically ex-Communist Party members who think that, a rad lib solution of setting up, one state with everyone having an equal vote is going to solve the problem, which it doesn't, because how do the refugees come back? Like if you have a vote, like on the right of return for Palestinian refugees, how are you going to get a majority for that? If half the population are the Hebrew Israelis, they won't agree to it, because then they're going to become a minority, and they want to avoid becoming a minority. They're going to try to manipulate the situation to be a majority in a one-state solution, and then it's going to be like treating the Palestinians as second-class citizens, in which they are the hewers of wood and the drawers of water in biblical terms. So, there's got to be another way, another constitutional mechanism, and that's what I set up there. And it's translated into Arabic now. It's circulating inside Palestine as well, that book. So that's the kind of work that I've been doing. But I've done so much more, like not counting prison time as well. All the prison episodes that I've had and the various reasons, for having done so is a whole other story. So, that's the way it is.
Thanks for sharing that. That's quite a bit of experiences that you've learned from it, and others hopefully can learn from as well.
Yeah. But I think that the alliance, a united front between Jewish people and Jewish people as a whole, Jewish Americans, and the Black nation in the USA, is a very important strategic alliance. It started, with some Jewish communists and some Jewish radicals who went down to support the voter registration drives in the South, two of whom were killed, of course.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but now I think it has to become, a strategic alliance, so that we can form a united front that becomes the core of a general alliance of all the minority nationalities who will take back the country from the dominant white supremacists who control the USA right now, and both of their political parties, which dominate, the electoral scene. Both the Democrats and the Republicans are white supremacists, as far as I can see from here. So
well, that's an interesting analysis, because there are some who say that the Democrats are not white supremacists and the Republicans are the white supremacists, and I disagree with that, because basically, as long as you're not opposing the system and you are allowing people who are not white to have a different reality than you, which is what the affirmative action ruling is all about. That's what that was about. That it mainly affected Black people, Latin people, some poor whites, yes, but the program was designed was a ruling class band-aid for structural inequality as far as positions in government. And the white population and the white politicians at the state, local, and national level support the eradication of programs like that. They support getting rid of any structure that will give any pretense that African Americans, Latin Americans, Native Americans, especially Blacks and Native Americans, are suffering any special oppressions, and therefore there should be nothing done to alleviate those special oppressions as far as Band-Aid programs, support programs, etc. So I agree with you. Both parties are white supremacists. I agree with you on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Even with Obama as president, like he was working for the Democratic Party. He was working for white supremacism. He just thought that, he merited being president, because of his personal qualities. Okay. But, like, what's he doing for the Black nation, besides verbiage? Nothing. Yeah.
Absolutely. In the area of reform, laws, policies, practices, he did absolutely nothing. No one can tell me one thing as far as laws, policies, practices, procedures, ideas, strategies, anything in the level of bourgeois political rights he did for African Americans. Nothing. Zero.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zero.
Even the President Johnson, he did more for the Black nation than Obama did.
I mean, and what is so funky about affirmative action rulings is those rulings essentially say we're going to set the clock back to Johnson and Kennedy. We're going to set it all the way back there. If y'all don't like it, oh well, too bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's basically what happened. No one is what gets me now is no one's having this discussion I'm having with you. The clock was set back to 1963 to 1965. And so that is what, 60 years?
Yeah.
Yes, it was set back 60 years. And nothing will be done now because the Supreme Court said nothing can be done. You have special programs for these communities that have suffered and continue to suffer systematic oppression, or what they call discrimination, or whatever what word they want to call. Obama was the worst thing ever happened to us, because now people want to honor him when in fact he actually was a disgrace as far as what he did, quote unquote, to help his own people, quote unquote. Nothing.
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah.
Nothing.
What about Cornel West? What do you think about him?
Well, Cornel West is first of all, I denounce the fact that Harvard University did not give him tenure. See, I'm gonna start there. Cornel West should be given tenure. Why? Why not? Why not? He should be given tenure. Period. No one else talks like me on this question. He should be given tenure. He is a valid academic. Why didn't he be given tenure? Because he was Black and he spoke out about things that affected people around the world in the United States that were unjust. Period. So I'm gonna say that. Secondly, I haven't really followed this political campaign too much now, because I don't know. Actually, Cornel West says a lot of things, but what is his strategy for Black liberation and freedom? I don't know what it is. But he talks a lot. He talks about social injustice a lot. He relates it to religion a lot. Okay, I'm not going to say he is not doing good work. I think he's doing something positive. But is it leading toward integration, i.e., affirmative action laws, or aimed toward freedom, i.e., liberation? I'm not sure where he's really what is his goal. But Dr. King, Medgar Evers, Fannie Hamer, all their good work, all that excellent work they did was based on struggling for integration. And the Supreme Court has said, and the president has said, and the laws have said, you ain't getting none of that. Besides, whatever we give you is all that you're gonna get. So hopefully Cornel, that's my view of it. I could be wrong, but hopefully Cornel West has seen that trap or seen the limitations of that approach, and he'll try to do something else. I mean, I think for him to, is he running for the Green Party? I think he's running.
Yeah.
He's not running as a Democrat. So his chance of winning, because of the way the system is made in the United States, there's no way he'll win unless everybody leaves the Democratic Party and votes for him, which is possible, but not too probable.
Yeah. Well, like besides, what we think about voting, like it's irrelevant, whether we vote ourselves, it's what the working class as a whole, has to be concerned about is getting a voice out in the open into the public that is speaking up on behalf of the majority of people in the United States, working class, both citizens and non-citizens.
Right.
But like you're right, I haven't heard him talk about the Black nation very much. I've heard him talk about Palestine more than he's been talking about the Black nation.
Well, I think the Black nation question now is a complicated question, because I'm telling you, the entire strategy from the whole beside the Black power movements, the African liberation movement, those movements were not about integration. But it is my view, again, I'm not denigrating anybody who fought for voting rights, who fought for civil rights, who died, who went in jail, who were run out the country. No, I'm not. I would be arrogant over. I would be extremely condescending. I'm just saying that strategy failed, and it showed it in the Supreme Court ruling. When the Supreme Courts of a country or the legislature of a country can determine your rights, then you ain't got no rights.
Mm.
Your rights have to be enshrined in the Constitution. And the basic document, you have this right, and we can't change it under any circumstances. And they're not enshrined in the Constitution. So very few people want to touch the Black question now because people don't know what to say or do. I think honestly they're befuddled. There were no demonstrations against the affirmative action ruling. None. Zero. Not one in the country that I know of. Which says people don't know what at least the civil rights leaders don't have an agenda, so it's got to come from outside the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
And perhaps Dr. West has some ideas. I want to give him a bit of doubt, see what he has to say. Sure, of course I am. Yeah. But I haven't. Just be honest with you, I need to pay more attention to his program. I haven't, and that's a weakness I'm going to have to correct.
Yeah, I think the Green Party is registered to have its votes counted in a few states, but it's very difficult to get a third party registered in most states. It's like set up, to be that way.
It's not set up. The United States electoral system is not meant to be democratic.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, okay, I don't feel that you can have democracy under capitalist rule. However, you can have a pretense of democracy with a parliament or whatever. The United States system is not even based on a pretense of a system. Mm-hmm. It's based on we have these two parties and that's it. Mm-hmm. Everybody else, well, you don't count. Mm-hmm. And that's not democratic. If you don't count, that's not democratic. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I don't want there to be a Nazi party. No. I don't want there to be a white supremacist party. No. I don't want there to be a party of only only rednecks. No. But you can't even have that in the United States. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's Democrat, Republican. That's it. Mm-hmm. And it's set that way. So whenever we have a Green Party, Peace and Freedom Party, Workers and Families Party, whatever party it is, they're tied into the Democratic Party or the Republican Party.
Mm. Yeah, like the Democratic Socialists of America are just, an affiliate of the Democratic Party.
Exactly. They're not independent.
Yeah. Yeah, I see
they're
that.
Not. They're not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that in terms of electoral strategy, we should be sort of educating people to think of the Dr. Cornel West, presidential campaign of the Green Party to be, like a chisel, something that you hold in your hand and you apply the edge to the system in order to crack it open. That's what I see that electoral strategy as, not as if, like we need to endorse, the electoral system of the USA right now, because it is not democratic, as you say. But in order to confront it, in order not to ignore what's happening and be left behind, I think that, that's a strategy, to be followed, like the Green Party campaign can become like a chisel to crack open the system in the USA and make it non-functional, basically, as well. Because, like each of the Democratic and Republican parties are trying to